The National Human Rights Commission (NHRC) and Prisoners Rehabilitation and Welfare Action (PRAWA) have unveiled resource materials and documentary on the prevention of torture. The public presentation of Torture Prevention Resource Materials and Documentary in Abuja was done to commemorate the International Day in Support of Victims of Torture. The Executive Secretary, Santoni Ojukwu, said the event was organized by NHRC, PRAWA, and the International Rehabilitation Council for Torture Victims (IRCT).
The resource materials would not only provide the needed enlightenment to citizens, but also capacity to players in law enforcement, security, and justice sectors. The National Human Rights Commission wants to use this special occasion to reiterate its position that torture is a violation of human rights and a crime under Nigerian law, as evidenced by Section 7 and 8 of the Anti-Torture Act of 2017. No amount of an alleged offense can justify torture in any form. The Commission will continue to deploy its promotional and protective mandates to work in partnership with both law enforcement and other agencies and organizations to stamp out torture and ensure accountability for the crime of torture. The Commission will also be working with relevant agencies towards the establishment of rehabilitation centers for victims of torture. Emerging testimonies from the independent investigative panel established by the Commission at the wake of the NSAS protests in 2020 have shown that torture remains widespread as a practice within some segments of our law enforcement. We need to stamp it out through efforts like this one as we are launching today. Ladies and gentlemen, justice for victims of torture does not end with court judgments, punishments of offenders, or monetary compensations. It should include rehabilitation to deal with long mental, psychological, emotional, and traumatic effects of torture. The Commission will soon be convening a panel of experts to advise on guidelines and modalities for establishment of these rehabilitation centers.
Similarly, Executive Director of PRAWA said there was a need to say no to torture and criminalize it.
But we have realized that we need to begin to raise our voices to say, yes, there's a need to ensure that we prevent torture. There's a need to say no to impunity. There is a need to criminalize torture. And thank God, Nigeria have also criminalized torture through the Nigerian, what is called a Torture Act of 2017. And interestingly today, one of the things you will see is the translation of the Anti-Torture Act of 2017 in all the major languages of Nigeria.
Also speaking virtually, Secretary General of IRCT said her organization was committed to seeing that torture victims were rehabilitated.
I'm really pleased that we are able to have organizations like PRAWA around the world. In fact, there are 160 members, torture rehabilitation centers around the world who are fighting to heal and to seek justice for torture survivors. It's not an easy job, and I think PRAWA and with like-minded colleagues in Nigeria, you have an excellent example of how civil society and some state authorities can work together to eradicate torture, to train on what it is, to recognize it, to know within your police, within your communities, within the public, what is torture and why is it illegal? And why is it important that there's not stigmatization around people who have suffered torture and that they have a human right to rehabilitation?
Chairman of the event, Professor Tajuddin Akanji, thanked the organizers for the enlightenment on anti-torture procedures.
The issue of torture or whatever inhuman treatment to citizens is a thing that the whole world is trying to fight against, and Nigeria cannot afford to be left behind. And one of the things we do is just the kind of thing that PRAWA and the partners are doing now, in order to open the eyes of the people so that they are aware of these problems and they are aware of the need for us to actually provide solutions to this problem.
Similarly, Mr. Tijani Mohammed, Director Police Discipline, Police Service Commission, urged that both the formal and informal sectors be enlightened on anti-torture measures.
Our focus appears to be on formal institutions that are alleged to be involved in torture acts. Torture is also happening in our domestic places, and we should expand our attention to encompass that. The country has taken a positive step by passing the Torture Act in 2017. All we need now is how to enforce the act, but we will not be able to do that if we are not enlightened about the act. That is where the importance of today's occasion comes into focus. The enlightenment that is being embarked upon by PRAWA, and by going further to embark on these publications.
Speaking, Mr. Isaac Armstrong, officer in charge of Regional Security, ECOWAS Commission, stressed that evidence should be collected without torture.
United Nations Convention Against Torture provides for absolute prohibition of torture, cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment, and it is considered a crime in international law.
The UN Day in Support of Victims of Torture is an international observance held annually on June 26th to speak out against the crimes of torture and to honor and support victims and survivors throughout the world.